listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. As always, Michael, I'm back, man. How we doing? It's been a while. It's been a couple of weeks since we've touched base.
Yeah.
Back, married, honeymoon, and all that stuff, man. It was an unreal 2 weeks. I couldn't even imagine how great it was, but it was just unbelievable. We're rested, we're recovered, and we're ready to draft some players in a week or so.
I love it. I saw one picture. Everybody looked like they were having a good time, and, you were doing your dance stuff out there. I loved it. It was awesome. Congratulations. I'm sure, this will, happily ever after is in your future, which is all that matters. So congratulations. Yeah. I'm excited for you. But we're great to have you back. I mean, one thing, you can go get married, but the NFL doesn't change, right? The NFL keeps going on with or without you, Femi, as I'm sure your new wife knows about. Life in this world is kind of never changes.
Yeah, no, it was just an unreal weekend. I'm sure a lot of our listeners are married, and thank you to everybody on Twitter that sent all the congratulations and all that stuff. It was warming to my heart seeing all that stuff yesterday. I mean, the week was, you get all of our families in town, and we know who we invited and everything like that, but that was so long ago. But then seeing is kind of believing, and seeing everybody come together, and the wedding weekend was just unreal. St. Lucia was unbelievable. We had a swim out pool. We were out there with sunset overlooking things. It was believe it or not, I came back with a tan. If you could believe that, I could get even darker than I already am. It was just ridiculously fun.
Of course you could. Why not?
It was, the Caribbean sun is built different, is what I learned down there in St. Lucia. A 10 out of 10 recommend if you were looking for a vacation spot. St. Lucia's one.
I wanted to give you a toast like Tony gave Uncle Junior when he became the boss. I wanted to kind of be around there and then have everybody taking pictures like the FBI with their things in their lapels. But, unfortunately, I couldn't do that. So we'll do a toast to you when I see you next week and I'm in Vegas.
There we go. Draft week. 7 days out from the NFL draft, first round in the Motor City. So let's talk a little bit of football here. And before we get into the draft, I've been reading up on this Commanders thing, who's going number 2. Maybe we'll get into the Top Golf visit that they all had there with the quarterbacks. But we saw the ESPN report yesterday, and this was a nice welcome back for me to catch up on my NFL reading from Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham, and Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN. And it was about the head coaching search for Bill Belichick this offseason. And the interesting thing that came out of that is Patriots owner Robert Kraft, quote, warning Arthur Blank not to trust Bill Belichick. You were quoted in the article. To my surprise, reading the article, I was like, I wonder if they talked to Michael. Oh, here he is with a quote. Your name was on your quotes, unlike some of the other anonymous sources. But, what was your reaction to the article? Obviously, you were involved in it. They're getting quoted and being interviewed. But I just thought it was really interesting that, once again, we're seeing more kind of fuel to this fire of Kraft Belichick, the divorce that appears to be a little bit messier than we all thought.
I have no idea. I can't understand the word trust here. I don't get what Kraft is trying to say. He doesn't trust somebody. When you don't trust somebody, that means is he stealing from you? Is that trust you don't have? Is he not doing what you tell him to do? Is he being difficult to work with? I mean, what don't you trust? The guy since 2014, those 5 years to 19, you won 3 Super Bowls, went to 4. What don't you somebody needs to explain to me why Belichick is untrustworthy. He shows up early. He works his ass off. He runs things in a very fiducial manner. He doesn't overspend your money. You have spent 10 years, okay? 10 frickin' years. You are the lowest paying cap in the National Football League. You spent the least amount of money in 10 years. And if the numbers are right, and most NFL teams are making between $300 to $500 million, depending on your stadium and all that, you do the math, Femi. He could have given you a hell of a goddamn Christmas wedding gift with that kind of cash, right? Yeah. So, where does the trust come from? This is what I don't understand. It's blowing me away. Robert doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust him. When did he not do something that would put the team in jeopardy that didn't win? To me, it's the most bizarre word to use. Maybe if you wanted to say he got too much credit, or if you want to say, he was difficult to work with, he didn't listen to me, or I get all that. But to say you don't trust him, now, what you're saying with that is it implies a lot of things, because remember, the NFL is built on trust. It has a very, very flimsy definition of trust, right? Because it gets into this loyalty vein. Loyalty in the NFL is do what I want you to do. That's not really loyalty. That's devotion, right? It becomes down to devotion. And really what Kraft is saying by using the word trust, Belichick wasn't devoted to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I really believe this goes back to he didn't push hard enough for me to get in the Hall of Fame. I didn't, he wasn't talking positively about me. And this whole notion that he told Arthur Blank, like let's be clear here. Blank called him. Don't try to say you said to hire him.
Yeah, and that's what the article says, is that he was, quote, a big part of why the Falcons ultimately chose to hire Raheem Morris there, which I guess if you're Arthur Blank, because when I was reading the article, it sounds like the first meeting on the yacht went really well with Belichick and Arthur Blank. Like, they seemed to kind of understand each other. Everything went well. Then it's once he went to the references, and then they had the second meeting there with Terry Fontenot and Rich McCay and then Beadle, the other guy. That's when things got a little bit haywire, it feels like.
Let's go through this, okay? Let's just take a little deep dive into the Atlanta Falcons. All right, let's just take a deep dive into the brilliance of this organization. Let me put it out there to start off with, okay? The line that drove me over the fucking edge, it drove me completely over the edge, that they're bragging about, that Terry Fontenot, Rich McCay, Beatles, I don't know him. I don't think he's bragging about it. I think he's just along for the ride. I think he's in a drive-by, right? And the great Ryan Pace, right? All these assholes down there are bragging that Belichick didn't fit in the top 3 of their candidate list. Oh, wow. I mean, you guys must be incredible hires, and, you must have a lot of Super Bowls. So let's just go through it for a minute. Rich McCay comes in 2003. So he's had, the record of the team since he's been there is 169 and 170. They've made 7 playoff appearances in his entire time there, 21 years, okay? 7, right? 7 playoff appearances they've been in. The guy they're interviewing went to 8 Super Bowls. They're judging this. They had 2 conference championships. They lost the Super Bowl to the gentleman, and they had 6 seasons of under 8 wins. Like, they're the standard for evaluation. See, this is the biggest problem with the NFL, is you're getting evaluated by people that can't evaluate. And for the audacity of this, so let's put things out there that really are true, okay? And everybody knows the elephant in the room is Rich McCay. Everybody does. Like, you can go through all the coaches that have been down there. Jim Mora Jr., Bobby Petrino, Mike Smith, Dan Quinn, Arthur Smith, all of them, okay? And all of them know Rich runs the team. Whether he has the title or doesn't, he runs the team. You can talk. I've got texts from former employees that, Rich has got the unbelievable ability of falling forward all the time. So at the end of the day, Rich McCay is the trustee to Arthur Blank's estate. Okay? He's the trustee to his estate. That's a powerful thing to be. That's a family member. Yeah. So what happened here? McCay wanted Raheem Morris from the get-go. That's what he wanted. And eventually his son will leave the Rams and come work for the Falcons. He's a family member. Of course he's going to do it. So he wanted this whole thing to be kumbaya. They got Fontenot to go along with, of course, Pace, because these guys are dynamic winners. They've won everywhere they've been. I mean, Pace has won 21 games in 3 years, and he's voting on a guy who's been to 8 Super Bowls. Brilliant, right? That's why the NFL is so freaking screwed up. Can you imagine you're getting judged by Terry Fontenot and Ryan Pace and Rich McCay, for that matter? So anyway, from the start, McCay had no interest in Belichick. Now, McCay made phone calls to see if Belichick was interested. And every one of those phone calls, it was said in the phone call that Rich wasn't going to be involved. But everybody knew he was going to be involved. Everybody knew he would be involved because you're never going to get him not involved. You could put him in an office downtown. You can put him in Augusta. You could put him in Florida. He and Arthur have some kind of relationship that nobody can understand or explain. So once that first meeting went, then McCay sprung into action. And I don't know this to be a fact, but I'm pretty sure that he probably said to Fontenot and he said to the other people, look, let Arthur have his moment, and then we'll go to work on it. Let Arthur have his moment with Belichick, and then we'll be able to build a case against him, and we'll be able to convince Arthur. And that's what they did. They never wanted Bill. I mean, Chris Olsen, the cap guy, it's in the article. Now, he's not quoted in there. I love how nobody had enough balls to put their names on it, right? Like, nobody had any fucking balls to put their names to it. I'm the only fucking guy in there, right? I'm the only fucking guy that had any balls to put their name on it because I wasn't going to let them destroy this guy. Like, there's no freaking way I'm going to let him. And not only is he my friend, he's an incredible human being, and he's the greatest coach of all time. I'm not going to let them destroy all these backwards channels. That's how they do it, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing in there, well, we don't want to change how we do our off-season program. Oh, yeah, that's really worked out well for you. It's really worked out well. You haven't been to the playoffs in how long? Like, seriously, like, when did you guys invent football in Atlanta? When did you invent football in Atlanta? And McCay knows how to play blank. He knows how to push the buttons. You know, we're an African-American community. We should hire an African-American coach. I get that. No problem. Makes a lot of sense. Arthur went through there was a lot of times where Arthur was criticized for not having enough minorities in his organization. That's a lightning bolt. He knows what to say. He knows what to say. And so to me, the column was just, it made it, to me, your view, we'll do it in the next block. It made Atlanta look like idiots, frankly. Yeah. It made Atlanta look like idiots.
Well, it's very strange that they would brag about Belichick not being in the top 3 of their candidates there. But, I mean, they weren't the only – they at least talked to him. Other teams didn't even talk to him, which I still think is one of the unreal things in the NFL head coaching cycle this year. Like what's – like, I mean, there was other teams that were discussed. I know, like, the Eagles, which we can get into that a little bit later. They kind of kicked it around a little bit before ultimately deciding on Nick Sirianni. It's –
The one that got me the most is Josh Harris's quote. Because, look, now we got 55 seconds. We'll go to break. But as you know, I am a diehard fan.
Yeah.
And I've watched this man run this team, okay? And I've watched it closely as an executive. I'm not an expert in basketball. I'm the first to tell you that. But I've watched this man run the team. I've watched him give power to people. I've watched what he's done. And to me, what he said, now he's quoted in the article, but it's kind of a backward quote from somebody else. We'll pick that up after the break because to me, that's another thing that's so fascinating about this column.
Yeah. Josh Harris is kind of, the sentiment is that he wants a strong kind of general manager type, kind of like what he has with Daryl Morey.
I'll get to that in a second. We'll get to him in a second.
Apparently he has it with Adam Peters in Washington. The Commander's always a story here. We'll talk more about this on the other side. A lot to unpack from this Belichick article here next here on the GM Show.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So we were talking about it as we were heading to break. Commanders owner Josh Harris. In the article, it talks about how he had spoken with Robert Kraft about Belichick, but told people in early December he respected Belichick but wasn't going to hire him. He wanted the same leadership structure that he had with the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils, where he has, quote, a strong general manager over a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, that's really worked out well for the Sixers, hasn't it? I mean, it really has. As a fan, I am just delighted with the success that this man has brought to the team, It's been really remarkable. We've gone through the Sam Hinkie administration, the process. And then he hired the great Brian Colangelo, and we picked Markel. I mean, really wonderful success, really wonderful success. And then we traded away Bridges for Zaire Smith because that front office thought they were both equal. One of his owners thought that, so that's why we did that. And then we hire Daryl Morey because he's a perfect guy to have in this. Come on, seriously, you're going to use the 76ers model as a successful franchise? Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding? I mean, I'm a Sixer fan. I mean, they barely beat the Heat minus Jimmy Butler last night. If you want to put together a list on my whiteboard in this goddamn office of the stupidity of the 76ers, we can make a long goddamn list. We can fill it up like the blackboard in Goodwill Hunting. I mean, we can fill this sumbitch up big time. So don't be sticking this is what I loved about the article. These people that have won nothing are sticking their chest out like they've achieved something tremendously. I mean, like, let's go back to Rich McCay for a second. I'm the only one who spoke on the record. I didn't kill Rich McCay in the column. I don't have to. People around the league that have worked there, in fact, I'll read one of the things. I mean, this isn't from me. This is somebody that's worked in there that said, basically, will always be blanks, eyes, and ears, always trust everything he says. He's a first ballot charter member of the Fall Forward Hall of Fame. Now, everybody that's been through there understands the dynamics of that relationship. So don't pretend you're going downtown and this is Fontenot and Ryan Pace running the team, and everything's going to be okay. This is what happens in the league. This is the way the NFL is. And if you're a Falcons fan, like I'm a 76er fan, you have to come to the realization you got no chance to win. You're not going to win anything. You might go, you have 7 years of playoff run, right? 7 years out of how many? 21? Meanwhile, you're evaluating the guy that went to 8 Super Bowls, had put 6 Super Bowl rings on his finger, was a defense coordinator, stopped 3 offenses that scored over 500 points. And then here's the other one that got me. He's out of touch with the game. Have you talked to him? Out of touch with the fucking game? He could whip your ass in knowledge in about 2 seconds. Like, he would embarrass you in a meeting if he wanted to. And he would probably start off by saying, with all due respect, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. So this whole notion is all this. Look, you could say, Lombardi, you're a friend of his. Goddamn right I'm a friend of his. But I'm also know what's true and what's not true. I wouldn't be going this hard if I didn't know what was factual, And there's some things that you can't, like some of your friends, like, hey, I love Josh McDaniels. I don't think he did a good job at the Raiders. I love him, but he's a good friend of mine. But I was wrong on the evaluation in terms of the mistakes he made when he was in Denver and all that. I admit that. But the reality, I still like Josh. That doesn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. But the reality of this one is, this is ridiculous. And for them to sit there and to pretend that they have the right methodology of what they're doing and then stick their chest out and have the audacity to brag about it, what are you bragging about? Like yesterday, he was on the Pat McAfee show, and he's sitting there, and I'm wondering what Terry Fontenot's living room looks like with all his trophies.
That was a nice touch there with the 6 Super Bowl trophies in the background. And it was interesting listening to that interview that he had with Pat McAfee. He said that he's still watching the college players. Like, he loves this part. So like you mentioned him falling out of touch with the game. He is as locked in as ever. He just doesn't have a head coaching job. He's ready to go, though, with evaluations, I'm sure, of all of these college prospects who are going to be drafted next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Well, look, here's the other thing that's now, because of course the media hates him because he didn't kiss the media's ass, right?
He didn't text them back.
It's what happens all the time. It's like we see this all the time. I mean, look, John Calipari's a great coach, a good person, all that. He hadn't won very much at Kentucky, but he got a hero's welcome in Arkansas, right? He got you'd have thought McCarthy came back from the Far East the way they represent, and which is great for Arkansas, but actually Musselman won more games than he did. He's been to 2 Elite Eights more than Calipari. Like, he didn't get that kind of reception when he walked in the building. So a lot of these things are perception-based. And because if you're really good with the media, it's like what we wrote about today in the Daily Coach about, are you a promoter? Are you a truth teller? Well, if you're a truth teller, the media probably isn't going to resonate to you. If you're a promoter, they're going to love you. They love P.T. Barnum. They'd show up to P.T. Barnum's events all the time. He took good care of them. He made sure that he was going to be, promoting, and the media was in his corner. So now the messaging is, Belichick's just being nice now because, he's looking for a job. Yeah, right. Okay. Like, there's not 1 ounce of non-authentic with the man. You don't dress the way he dresses if you're trying to do something that's outside your realm. He could give 1 rat's ass about it, right? So you're going to find out how smart and how much he is. But again, this trust thing is what drives me so crazy. Like, define what the trust is. What is that? When you go to the definition of trust, right? If you go to the definition of trust, it's a firm belief in reliability and truth, the ability of the strength of someone as it relations to what you're built on. Like, tell me what was non-trustworthy about what he did in his 24 years as a head coach that went to 8 Super Bowls, put 6 Super Bowl trophies on your mantle, and increased the value of your franchise by at least $2 billion.
So my interpretation from the article, because like what's being spun out of the Falcons brass is that we want it to be collaborative. We don't want one person to be in control of everything. But I did find it interesting in reading the article that it seemed like Belichick, based on what was reported in this article, was willing to say, hey, like I will come in and work with Terry Fontenot. I'm not really thrilled about working with McCay, but I'll work with Fontenot and we can be collaborative and we can kind of go from there. Is that what you think Kraft means? They say, hey, he's just trying to, like, he's not going to work with him. He's going to come in there and he's going to take over the entire operation. Is that what you think Kraft meant by the trust factor thing? Or like, because like it is weird that he would say that, oh, don't trust this guy, the guy that gave him all those accolades over 20 plus years.
I think a lot of it is the fact that what is collaboration? I mean, let's go there. If you don't know anything about football, why would I be collaborating with you? If you know half about football, collaboration is a wonderful word and it's really important. But if the two levels, like if I went to Harvard Medical School, they're not collaborating with me. I don't know anything about fucking medicine. Like I don't know anything. Nobody's collaborating with me on shit. I mean, like Big Daddy Vince was over the house on construction. He ain't collaborating with me on construction. I don't know a fucking thing about it. Like, your level of intelligence, your level of expertise allows you to be collaborative. And for Belichick, if you have that, you can be collaborative. He'll listen. But if you're saying stupid shit, if you're doing dumb things and have no backing of it, you're going to get your ass in, you're not going to be asked the question.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be asked it. Like collaboration only works when you have a lot of smart people that understand what you're doing. Look, here's a guy. You listen to Ernie Adams on the Julian podcast, which was great. I urge everybody to listen to Ernie. Ernie was tremendous. And Ernie would be like, look, you go tell Bill something. He listens. There was no ego. I mean, Ernie's on this talking about a lot of things that Ernie did. Bill could have easily taken credit for all of it. He don't take credit for any of it. Any of it. Most people that are non-collaborative are egomaniacs. They want the credit for everything. People that are that have the ability to keep their ego out of things are usually willing to listen. So there's that's another word that they have completely wrong or to understand. There's no way. If you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe in your ability to know football and to understand the pro game and where we're going and what's happening, you got no shot.
And that goes to what you said in the article where it says, quote, but where I think he's not getting a fair enough evaluation is if you have a good way of doing something, he's one of the all-time best listeners. He's open to change. It just has to be smart change. It's like we're not just going to, like you said, we're not listening to everybody just to get some sort of consensus. It has to be smart opinions that we're collaborating on.
What's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with that? You're given, the leader has to make a decision.
Yeah.
The leader has to make a decision. So I just think, to me, look, it is. I think it's great that he's going to do the draft. You're going to see exactly how he works, how his mind works. Let's look at it. Look at what he was talking about on the kickoff cover, on the new kickoff rule. How you're going to have bigger like everything he does, he thinks it through. He's not going to put his name on something that isn't going to be of the highest quality, which is complete. If you know him, like all of us that have been in there, all of us know this. Just like all the people that have been in Atlanta know what really goes on in Atlanta, right? They all know. Nobody wants to say it because they all want to keep their jobs or they all want to keep working in the league. I ain't trying to work in the league. So I'll truth tell what happens behind the scenes. Rich is a powerful guy within the league. And if you're not on his side, you cannot probably get another job. He can call some owner up and you're dead. I don't need that.
Yeah.
So I tell the truth.
Yeah, I think job preservation is what a lot of this comes down to, is what we've talked about throughout this whole process, especially with the Atlanta Falcons. There might have been a little threatened by Bill Belichick coming in there with the knowledge that he has. Real quick, though, before we wrap up this segment here, we'll continue on the other side, but this will be doing it for us on the DKN. The note about the Eagles and like their concern of, hey, how long is he going to be doing this? I thought was interesting. Like, is this something that where Belichick takes a job? Like, is he going to be there for 4 or 5 years, or is it 2, 3 years? Maybe it's 1 year. I thought that note was actually like something that was like a legitimate concern for an organization to have, but we obviously don't know the answer to that question. Only one person would know the answer.
I think the way that was presented in the column, I thought it showed that Philly was second-order thinking, that on the surface he would offer X, Y, and Z to our team. But then if we did this, where would we be here, there, and there? I think it was really late. I think Philly did exactly what good organizations should do. Considered it, looked at the positives and the negatives, and then decided to maybe stay course for a year and see how that works. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. Like, to me, there's nothing wrong with Atlanta not hiring Belichick. There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with is this narrative that they're spinning, right? That's what's wrong.
Yeah. Well, you feel the need to spin stuff when you want to justify it to yourself. We'll continue on the other side, talk some draft notes next year on the GM Shuffle. You know, it was interesting in talking all of this stuff about Bill Belichick. He did make that appearance on the Pat McAfee show, which I thought was a really engaging interview. He did mention this time of the draft cycle, the news that's getting out there oftentimes is not from the teams, and more often so is from the agents. So when you take that kind of big picture view of what everything that's been reported about the 4-quarterback visit to Topgolf with the Commanders and all these teams bringing in these people and this prospect, what does this mean? We're all trying to make sense of it. Should we be trying to make sense of this stuff, or is a lot of it just a lot of noise leading up to the draft 7 days out?
No, I think a lot of it is noise, right? And I think nobody, like the other thing Bill said, and I think it's so true, is the fact that nobody's boards are going to be identical. And I keep harping on this, right? And so, like, because of that, you know, Odunze may be higher than Brian Thomas. He's higher. Maybe some teams have him higher than Neighbors. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, you have to take the mindset of your opinion is your opinion, and another team's opinion is their opinion, and neither's right, right? The opposite of a good idea, it could be another good idea. Mm-hmm. And so you just can't kind of get caught down this road, right? And so, like, we're seeing, you know, you've heard the name Spencer Rattler is moving up the board, which understandable. Spencer Rattler's got a very good instinct for the game, the quarterback from South Carolina. Mm-hmm. He's got great awareness. Fortunately, he's 6 feet tall without a lot of foot speed, you know, so there's some limitations to his game. But, you know, but he's trying to get pumped up, right, into that area. I think the quarterbacks are separate. So, you know, I think what Bill's saying is this is the age. It's next week when we do the pod on Wednesday morning, which we're going to do before the draft on Thursday when you and I are out in Vegas. When we do that, then, you know, that'll be more club leaking information. You know, that'll be what they think about the visit, who has the medical, who doesn't, you know, like who's concerned about Michael Penix. You know, where's Brian Thomas medical? Where's Lane McConkey's medical? You know, there's some guys that have some medical that you're concerned about and how these teams handle it and what they do.
Yeah, because I think that's the part, especially for the people who dabble into the draft betting cycle of things. It's like you see the odds of like, who's going to go the second overall to the Commanders. Jaden Daniels, his odds have continued to go up. And remember, we talked 2 weeks ago, Daniels was around that minus 150 range to be the second overall pick. And now when you look at our show sponsor, DraftKings, he's minus 350. But every mock draft that I read, every nugget that I read is, well, the Commanders haven't said anything, but people just feel that this is the direction that it's going to go in. Well, if the Commanders haven't said anything, why is this going out to minus 350? This is all people just making educated guesses. Well, they might be educated, but they're still a guess. We don't. The Commanders could take J.J. McCarthy. They could take Michael Penix. We don't know. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but like we still don't know what Washington is going to do, and that probably is not going to trickle out until some point next week versus what we're kind of quote unquote hearing and all the mock drafts putting Jaden Daniels there at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think this Jaden Daniels rise by DraftKings, I think, is a reaction to what Adam Schefter said on a Washington podcast while you were sunning in St. Lucia. You know, Adam was working, and so he said that at the end of it, he kind of made the statement, look, you know, get your Jaden Daniels. You know, and that little bit of a hint, a suggestion, you know, has probably moved this market. And that's what happens. These markets move, right? They move like crazy in that area. So I think to me that's kind of what it is. I think I'm going to go back to exactly what I said from the beginning. If you're betting the over 5 quarterbacks in the draft, 4.5 quarterbacks, which what is minus 190 on the juice, you're saying Penix or Knicks are going in the first round. Now, I think that leads us to, if the Raiders who want a quarterback, I know there's kind of they needed offensive lineman, defensive lineman, need a quarterback. But if they're in a position to get back into the first, or if Denver's in a position to get back into the first, would they do that? Would somebody willing to give up next year's pick to move up to make something really enticing for those teams picking in the bottom of the first round? Because when you get down to the bottom of the first round, what you have to understand is the player you pick at 26, you could get at 40. You might be able to get him at 40. I mean, last year New England was getting ready to make a pick in the first round. They picked Gonzalez in the first round, and when they picked him, they knew that they had to, they were torn. Do they pick Keenan White or the Gonzalez? Well, Gonzalez was ranked higher, so they went in that direction. And then, now they had to make a decision to, will White make it to us? Because they had a grade on White that would indicate he did. And he went right, they got lucky on that. But sometimes you don't get lucky on that. Mm-hmm. My point being that they could have picked White at 25, but they got him at where they got him. You know what I'm saying? So that when you're in that 20 to 45 range, the grades on the players on the board are all relatively clustered together. They're all in that potential starter cluster. And so for fans, you're giving up a first for a second. But no, what you're giving up is that you're getting a better player. You're getting the same player on a cheaper contract and getting a chance to add more bullets into your gun to get another player.
Yeah, no, and that's the whole purpose of value and trying to trade down. And more often than not, teams who are trading back into the first round, it is for that quarterback. Sometimes you'll see other positions, but more often than not, it is the quarterback. Do you feel comfortable saying that we're going to see 5 guys go next Thursday? Because it's minus 200, the over 4.5 over at DraftKings right now, which obviously the core 4 of Williams, Daniels, May, McCarthy, those are like kind of the 4 guys that are considered locks, quote unquote, for the first round. Could Penix go? Could Nix go? Could Rattler go? Like, do you feel comfortable one of those guys end up being the 5th? Rattler's not going to
go. No, Rattler's not going to go. No, I think it's going to come down to, and this is what makes it really hard. What makes it really hard is that you don't know what the medical is on Penix. And it only takes one team to fall in love with Nix. So, and right now, everybody is not sure where those teams are. And I think that's going to take a little bit more time. Surprised it moved up to minus 200, because history tells us that not all 6 players are going to be good. So, I think it's kind of a wait and see. If I were playing it, I would definitely play the over.
Yeah. Because it feels like you already have 4 who are locked in. Then it's just yes, no, will Bo Nix or Michael Penix go in the first round is what you're essentially betting with that prop there. Because I think when you look at the order of the draft, like you mentioned those teams that have been bandied about that could potentially take a guy. It's like teams like the Broncos who picked 12th, the Raiders who picked 13th. You have all these. I mean, who knows? The New Orleans Saints pick 14th. I know they have Derek Carr locked in, but they should probably be kicking around, taking a quarterback eventually. You want to move on from Derek Carr. It feels like a lot of those teams are sort of clustered in there, but maybe they want to go the route of position player to improve their team immediately, or they could turn and go to that quarterback route and eventually look for that guy to be the future of their franchise in the next days. But we've talked a lot about these offensive players, quarterbacks, receivers, et cetera. Those are the headline guys. What about the defenders? Because we do have some interesting defender draft position props over at DraftKings. Not a whole lot of defenders expected to go in the first round. The number is at 10.5.
Shocking.
Over under 10.5 defenders. It sounds like this is going to be a record-breaking offensive draft where we could see 19, maybe even 20 guys go who on the offensive side of the ball here. Defensively, is this a weaker draft, or are we kind of overlooking some of these defenders who are coming out?
No, I mean, I think Brian Murphy's a really good player. I think Latu from UCLA is a really good player, although the medical, he's had fusion on his neck. I mean, those 2 guys, to me, I don't know why Murphy's not a top 10 pick. I don't know why the Mitchell, the corner from Toledo, is not a top 10 pick. I mean, Arnold from Alabama is a good player. Dallas Turner gets all the love. I think Latua is a better player, but the medical is a concern on him. So to me, Murphy's a 3 technique that could rush. He's a great kid. He'll play his ass off. I have a hard time passing on that, but Maybe the Falcons will take another running back this year and pass on a legitimate 3 technique who plays football down the street from. But the brilliance of them is just remarkable. Why would you ever question that brilliance? And poor Arthur Smith, he's sitting in Pittsburgh getting blamed for everything. If Arthur Smith didn't need another job in the league, we get him on the GM shuffle. We get a real story out of this whole goddamn thing. Anyway, I was told by somebody in the league there's probably 8 legitimate first-round defensive players in the draft. 8. Now, that doesn't mean there's only going to be 8 that go, because there's going to be guys that are on that fence between the first and the second round. Is Kool-Aid a first-rounder? A lot of mocks do. Is Robinson from Missouri a first-rounder? Newton from Illinois, the defensive inside tackle. Is he? And then you got to do the medical, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's just why there's so many. But that's why, for me, if I'm picking in the top 10, the way this defensive board cuts off, if I get a chance to get a corner or a defensive lineman, I ain't passing it up. Like, I could see a team that needs a 3 technique that I would trade up to get Murphy, because you're getting yourself a 3-down starter. They're hard to find.
Yeah, those defensive interior guys. We talk about quarterbacks hate interior pressure for some reason. And we've seen this offseason. A lot of those defensive tackles have gotten paid. Clearly, this is a valuable position. We've seen that with the dollars that are being doled out there. You wonder why a guy like Byron Murphy, who played at a big program at Texas, they made the college ball playoff. He's not we all know who he is, but right now his draft position is 16.5. And if you want to go under, it's minus 200. So the implication is that he'll at least go in the top 16. Maybe he creeps toward the top 10 there. I know some of the insiders have started to talk about how he could be a guy who's one of those quote-unquote risers by the time we actually get to the first round this time next week.
But you could get it's hard to find those guys, right? When you look at the end board, whether it's Robinson at Missouri, whether it's Versa from Florida State, whether it's the Penn State Robinson, there's guys that are good players, the Nealon, the Western Michigan kid, there's a bunch of those guys that are good players. There's a lot more edges than there are inside players. And there was a time in the NFL where the tackles were more important than the ends. It's why you had the great players play tackle. There's so many great tackles at a time because that inside pressure. And then we shifted to the 34 defense back in the 80s, and then it kind of became, the edges became more prevalent. But I think we're moving back to the tackle, where if you don't have one of those legitimate 3 techniques rushing, it's hard to win. It's hard to get pressure. They can block the outsides. They chip. They do all the things in there. It's when you get that inside guy like Chris Jones or Jeffrey Simmons, those guys, that's a game plan problem.
Yeah. And also, too, I think from a philosophical standpoint, once you get outside the top 10 and you're picking, isn't the conversation is, would I rather get the best defensive tackle, or would I rather draft maybe the 3rd best offensive lineman, or maybe the 4th best wide receiver? Yeah. I feel like, don't those conversations sort of happen once you're on the clock and it says, all right, how do we have these guys ranked? And hey, we can get another receiver a little bit later on, but if we want a defensive tackle, we can get the best guy in the board right now. So let's go ahead and just draft this guy here and address the other position a little bit later.
Well, that decision's usually done by the horizontal board. So if you have a tackle graded a 67 and the next corner's a 64, that's not even a conversation. Yeah. The horizontal board, the grading has taken care of that. Where you're having this conversation in your mind is, if both players are 64, who do we take?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what you get paid to do if you're a general manager, is you get paid to make the horizontal board decision. And that's where, we fucked up tremendously in the 95 draft, right? We're sitting there, and we stuck with, we had a chance to take Curtis Martin, and we took the kid from Ohio State, Craig Powell, because he was an edge guy, and we had same grade on both players, and we kind of thought we'd get Martin later, and we don't. We passed up a Hall of Famer for a guy who didn't play well. So that decision is what you get paid to make. You get paid to make that. We're taking this guy over that guy, the same grade. Whereas whoever is, and there's only a few people in every organization that truly have evaluated the entire horizontal board and have written reports on them. It's funny. I was at a pro day, and I was talking to a general manager in the league, and he asked me what Bill did, and I said, well, Bill writes up every single player. He said, what? I said, he writes up every player. I can show you his notes. He writes them all up on his Mac. And the guy said, our coach just talks about him. Well, if you're going to do the job right, you got to write them up. You got to put down on paper what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because then, like, if you're just talking about it, you can change your mind. All of a sudden, you get a little bit convoluted. But there's something
There's
about
no document. There's no doc. It's like, and people in this league change their mind. I mean, there's. I mean, one of the Harbaugh. I loved Harbaugh. We wanted to hire him. No, you didn't. You thought he was a horrendous coach. People make the changes all the time.
It's got to fit the narrative.
I have a good memory.
It's like, oh yeah, we had this guy as fifth on our board.
What you're going to find out, though, now that you're married, your memory will be shit. Like, my memory is really good, except when it comes to anything that involves Millie and what she says, because her memory is like, I get trumped on that by 15. I have no chance. This is some of the advice I'm going to offer you as we move forward. And now that you've had your wedding bells, like, your memory is going to be good up until you and your bride have a conversation. Her memory wins every freaking time.
Every time. I got to start writing
every time.
stuff.
Undefeated.
Got to start writing stuff down.
I mean, they're undefeated. You're never winning. You're never winning.
I think that is something that I've already conceded.
I mean, they're the Harlem Globetrotters. They're undefeated. Never lost.
Apparently, as the husband, I'm the Washington Generals. is what I'll be, just taking a L every single time.
I mean, Jim Rockford had 122 shows. I just wrote about this for VSiN. He had 122 episodes in his whole series. He was 122-0. He never lost, but he never got paid all of them.
He never got paid.
This one you can't win, and you're probably not going to get paid.
Hey, you know what? That's what I signed up for. It's what we do for the ones we love. It's what we do. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. Like, I'm starting to kind of get in the mindset of a married life, because I was talking to my wife, which, wow, to say that out loud, my wife. I asked her, I was like, which photo do you think I should share? And I sent her a couple photos, and she was like, she was kind of, I could sense that she was lukewarm on them. So I was like, but then she came back to me. She said, you know what? It's your account. Do whatever you want to do. And I was like, I'm not falling for this. And I asked her, I said, which one is your favorite? And that's what I'll share. And then she sent me a different one. And I was like, boom, okay, I'll send that. So I'm starting to pick up some things here and there. I'm starting to, a couple things you got to make compromises. You got to make sacrifices. That's such as married life. As I'm 12 days in. Yeah. It's going good so far. Let's hope it keeps going that way. Before we wrap up, though.
Yeah, it's all on you. It's all on you.
Got to get in where you fit in. Before we wrap up, I do want to update folks on our podcast schedule for next week. It is draft week. We cannot wait for it. So we're going to give you not just 2 podcasts. We're going to give you 3 podcasts. Starting on Monday, our usual time, we'll have a pod for you guys. We'll also have a pod on Wednesday. So there'll be no Thursday morning pod. Make sure you write that down in your schedule, in your routine. No Thursday morning pod. We'll give you a pod on Wednesday. So that pod leading up to the first round has a little bit more runway. And you guys can consume that Wednesday and Thursday morning as we head up to the first round of the draft Thursday evening. We will, though, be a live show 5 to 8 West Coast time, 8 to 11 Eastern during the first round on the DraftKings Network and on VSiN. You can check us out, get our instant reaction to all 32 picks that will be coming in on NFL Draft Night, and then a special Friday morning pod to recap everything that went on in the first round. Are we going to see any crazy trades? Do we get 5 quarterbacks in the first round? All of the top headlines. We'll break all that stuff down Friday morning after the first round, and then we'll obviously carry into the weekend, and we'll be back the following Monday to recap everything from NFL Draft Weekend. But just wanted to let you guys know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Thursday night, special show, 8 to 11 Eastern on the DKN Network and also on VSiN. Michael, that does it for us here on this pod. It's good to be back in the saddle. We're a week out. Cannot wait for it. You're coming out here to Vegas for the draft. We can't wait to have you here in person, and we're going to have a whole lot of fun, man. Let us know when you keep hearing stuff. We want to know what's going on at pick 2 with the Commanders.
And I'm gonna toast you. I'm gonna toast you out there just like Tony did Jr. Have a good one.
We'll see you guys Monday.
But you're not the new boss, though. That's clearly the case. We know that now.
I'm just trying to be a capo. That's how I'm trying to be.
Yeah, it's all you can be, Femi. Looking for ties. Ties are good for you.